Hello, and welcome to this episode of Carbonite U. Now, we've already covered switcher modes and we've gone through the reference section. So in this episode, let's get into how to set up our inputs and what all the configuration options offer to us. In Dashboard, we go ahead to our Configuration tab and then our Inputs tab. Now you'll notice there are three sub-tabs within the Inputs menu. There is the Physical Input section, the Internal section, and the Substitution Table. First up, let's talk about the physical inputs. So your physical inputs are hard-coded to SDI input 1 through 24. Now we're in an HD mode, and what you will see when you go into UHD mode is the physical numbers will still match the label of the IO which is supported. And that's 1, 2, 3, though if you choose 3, 4, 5, and 6 can be grouped together as a single quad link input in either quad square division or 2SI. So input 7 can be paired up with 8, 9, and 10 to generate another quad square division or 2SI input. In UHD, if you run these as single link inputs, then you'll just use the first input and none of the other inputs actually show up in the list. So in UHD, I'll see 1, 2, 3, 7, and then it jumps to 11 through 24. As in UHD, we're able to have 18 inputs. And again, with the format conversion that we have, we can take single link of non-UHD sources. I've set my system up so that it has everything on the first three, and then I jump over. That way I can flip in and out of UHD mode on this system. But normally you would populate them. In the text field, here we can come in and we can name our text. This is the name that is going to show up throughout the system as the source name, as well as on the panel mnemonics. And that's where the next column comes into play. Here, we can specify the font size, small, medium, and large, the color, green, orange, or yellow, as well as the inverse color. So whether or not we invert the text over top of the color. This gives you multiple combinations of how you want the text to appear on your physical panel. This is also represented when we go into the virtual soft panel find over here. But again, we'll come back to that after. Alpha source is where we define the input that we want this input to use as its alpha channel. That way, when we do an auto select key or a linear key, it'll automatically assign the alpha channel from the input that is providing that key source. CG1 is on input 7, so I clicked on its alpha source and I went to input 11, which was where I had named and added CG1A, so the alpha spigot that's coming from my expression graphics engine. Next up, you can tell it how you want the default mode to behave. I want to perform shaped keying, so to have additive keying where we add, fill, and duplicate it or double add it on top. That's how you get that high quality glass look. However, it requires that the same areas that you want to be transparent need to also be that black color in the fill as well. If it's not, then you'll have to run as unshaped. Next up, we have the ability to predefine a mask source for the chroma key. In Carbonite Ultra, we've brought in our Ultra Chrome Gen 2 chroma key. Now, this is what the Ultra Chrome HR is based off of, and it's not exactly the Ultra Chrome HR. It doesn't have the 044 input, but it does have all of the same characteristics and controls that we have in the Ultra Chrome HR. In addition, when we added frame sync delay to inputs, this also enabled us to perform all of the functions up until the point of the 044 keyer. But this does also now include a dedicated mask source that you can assign. That way you can kind of use it like an additional alpha channel. Now that we understand the mask source, when we look at this, now we can see that with our pivot, if this graphics engine was supplying me with an alpha that also had the mask in that alpha channel, I'm going to want to add that as my mask source. That way, when I perform the chroma key, it's automatically going to pick up those extra alpha channels that are coming out for the foreground objects, and I can mask the chroma key accordingly. So it's a really nice way to also mask off extended sets where that mask is going to be coming out as a dedicated source. So now I don't have to go into the mask and select it manually. It's already going to auto assign for me. So again, fantastic feature, and especially helpful if I have multiple engines with multiple tracking. When each camera has its own separate tracking engine, I'm going to want to easily define those different mask sources to the appropriate camera for the appropriate engine. And then that way, in my mini-MEs, I could be chroma keying this without an issue. Next up is the GPO. Now, first, you have to make sure that you have configured a GPO. By default, on the GPIO tab, they're all by default a GPI, meaning they're looking to receive instead of provide a voltage or a short to ground. So here we'll just quickly turn one into a GPO. We'll make sure that it's an edge trigger, and we want it to go from low to high. So this will go from low voltage to 5 volts, and we can specify the duration of how many frames it stays high for before it falls off. Depending on the device, some devices want a longer hold onset time. That way, they're sure that it wasn't noise. Now that we have at least one of these assigned, when we come back and we click on that GPO tab, you will now see that GPO 8 is available to be attached. When we provide this, we are also given the option to add a pre-delay. So this is a pre-roll, just like when I attach a video server device. What this will do for me is when the roll clip button is enabled, this will allow us to fire the GPO, wait the number of frames we've defined for this source before transitioning it on there. That way, if it was rolling something like a video server or a clip player that we can't send an amp command to, we can give it a GPI trigger and now wait, in this case, say 5 frames. That way we know it started rolling, and when we see the video on air, we will have a nice, clean first frame. When we have our format converters and frame syncs assigned, or in this case with +IO, all of them available to me, you simply click on this column. I can now select whether I want it as just straight SDI, so no frame sync, turning on the frame sync, which again will auto detect the format coming in, and if it needs to be converted, it will enable dynamically the format converter. If it detects this as a SD source, it is also going to make available to me the options for how I want to perform a 4:3 to 16:9. So do I want to pillar box it? Do I want to zoom it? Or do I want to stretch it? Ultra is able to accept a TSL UMD ID and addressing into the system. When you look at the status page, you see that we define for you that the TSL UMD server port is on 5727. Now, an external system can send us tally data, but more importantly, UMD names. So this is very helpful when we're integrated with, say, an Ultrix router or a third-party control system. That system can send the names. Now, we want to make sure that we pair it up accordingly with the assignment that that system has done. So for this, let's consider that we are connected to an Ultrix router, but the first output connected to the first input is actually input 11, or it's using ID 11. What we've done here is we've told input 1 to track output 11 of the router. Because it's sending us all of the IDs of the TSL IDs, we want each input to know which one it's supposed to track. You can set multiple rules. So this can be set up for tally only. This was added previously when we allowed the switchers to be controlled by another switcher for doing tally data. Because if I want to put a source in the multi-viewer, but track the tally information from another source, i.e. my replay machine is giving me an overlay on a character out, I'm going to take actual input to air, but what's in the multi-viewer is going to be the character output. So in this case, that input, I would want to set it to tally only. And now it's actually tracking a different input. When we want the names to follow, then of course we have it in on mode. So now I've got names and tally. If we just wanted the name information, then we set this to off, and now the switcher will get its names from the router, following whatever is routed to it, which is output 11 connected to input 1, or whichever output has been assigned ID 11. It will allow the switcher to be defining the tally state for the device. One of our new features that we added in version 4 was a feature called Live Assist Follow. This allows me to define 4 custom pages, and if real quick recall, it's under the system page, Live Assist. So here I can link any custom panels as well as I can link any device. So if I have a TRIA server, I can grab it. If I have a pivot camera, I can grab it very easily. You just pick it, go into the drop down, find the device. Then on the inputs, to make sure that the panel follows properly to that page or that device within your menu system, you have to make sure to tell it. So here you can see that CG1, I've come in and I told it to follow to the expression device. And now in my Live Assist menu, it's going to auto follow directly from that device. Very cool feature. Next up is the internal tab. The internal tab allows us to change the default names for all of the internal sources. And that includes buses, because a bus or an output can have a different name if you chose to do so, including aux buses. If I was using an aux bus to feed monitor 5, I can come in here and I can name that. Aux buses can also be used for direct panel source follows. In that case, I could go to aux2, and if aux1 was assigned on the bus map as a source, I can now select that. Anytime I make a switch on aux1, aux2 will be following as well. This also works within your keyers and your background buses and your preset buses. So I could use aux buses to feed DVE boxes within my keyers by assigning them an aux bus. You'll notice that the chroma keys also can have their names changed. Again, there's 4 channels of chroma key with alpha channels, and these things are hard-coded or hard assigned. There's also panel follow, which you can enable as well, which is a nice feature if there was an internal source that you wanted to force tracking of a custom panel. You'll also notice that the media manager is hard-coded to the media stores, so it's also going to auto-follow. These internal sources can have GPOs linked to them as well. Moving on to our final tab, in this menu, we've got the substitution table. Now, the substitution table is used with our canvases, which used to be called multi-screen. This leverages the ability that when I'm performing canvases, I can have sources have substitutions. Why is this important? I may have a 3-wide projector system, and when I take camera 1, I want it to scale that across the screen. But I have a video server with 3 outputs that gives me a pixel accurate feed, or maybe I use 3 media stores to create a pixel accurate background. In that case, I would want to make sure that it tiled. That way, whenever I select, let's say media 1 is selected for mini ME1, right? Sorry, Mini ME2, you don't have to do the first one. The substitution for this is going to be Media 2. And then we want to add another one, and that's going to be the same source, but for ME3, we want to go ahead and we want to substitute Media 3. And so now with that, we've started to create our substitution table, and it becomes very, very easy to assign sources that need different input. Now currently, not everything is in Dashboard. And due to that, we're still going to have to go into the on-panel menu to perform a few more of the actions that aren't yet supported. So let's go ahead, jump into the virtual panel, since the menu structure works the same. Now that we're into the virtual panel, which in the menu navigation can be found in the soft panel that I'm using, the menu structure works the same, only we've got a few extra buttons. Instead of having to hold down the menu button to tap next for a back, you get both buttons. Hit menu, grab the upper config mnemonic button. Now we can jump into select input. On the physical panel, this is a knob that scrolls clockwise and counterclockwise, and if you push on it, it has a button. So we're simulating up scroll, down scroll, and the push button with 3 buttons in the virtual panel. The first thing you'll see is the name. So just like the name column, you can actually come in here and use the knobs to change the name and set up the mnemonic for the device. And of course, you see the representation of the mnemonics in your virtual panel as well. Alpha source can also be assigned here. And the first knob allows you to scroll through the physical and internal inputs. So this is scrolling the input list. This would then allow me to set what I want my alpha to be, and then if it's shaped or unshaped. If we press the next key, the input stays the same, so you can still scroll up and down, but I can no longer click on it to drop into the mnemonic naming area. Now I can select the device that I want to associate with this. So if I come down and I look at CG, if I want to associate a Rostock device with this, I would click on next, and then I would use this button to scroll up until I found that device. And then I would click on the select button. Now we're going to cover devices in a separate tutorial. This is for external audio mixers like a Yamaha O1V96 or a DM1000. And this, obviously not available because I haven't set up an audio mixer. But now I would be able to link the channels or the faders that are to be associated with CG1 for when it goes to air. Just like before, we can set a GPO. So if I wanted 8 and then the pre-delay, it's all there. Our video type is where we can set up our SDI frame sync, or our quad frame sync. So we're going to go ahead and leave that as SDI. Now we can also create substitutions directly on the panel. However, as we saw from the dashboard entry, it's a lot easier from there. All of that information that you saw on dashboard, primarily it's setting up your audio channels for an external mixer and setting up the device control. Another topic might be the physical tally assignment, and again, we will cover that in a separate video. As you can see, setting up your inputs is a breeze in dashboard. We hope you enjoyed this, and for future videos, if there's something you want to see, please send us an email to switchers@rossvideo.com, and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for watching.